So one of the biggest illusions in life is that you actually have control, right? Anybody here like control? Yeah. Some of us love control. Now, I think on like a practical, intellectual level, like we know that at some point we don't have control, but we get lulled into this belief that we can control most of our life. And I think part of that is because we have so many little decisions that we make on a daily basis that we are the ones who are deciding what's happening. Like you wake up in the morning and you get to decide what you have for breakfast. I mean, maybe you're going to have a bagel, maybe it's a bowl of cereal, maybe it's a bowl of ice cream. You're like, I'm an adult, nobody can tell me what to do. I'm going to have ice cream for breakfast, right? I don't know. You get to decide what it is you wear on a given day. Like I dressed myself this morning. I picked out these pants with this shirt. It's usually a pretty easy decision for me. It's whether or not I choose the black shirt, the white shirt, or the gray shirt. That's about what my color spectrum is. But I make that decision on what I want to wear. If you're somebody who has a commute to work, you get to decide. Are you going to listen to music or a podcast or something else? You get to decide what you do. But then we have these moments that bring us crashing back to reality. Like we like to think, I'm the master of my own destiny. I command my kingdom. I make all these decisions. But then we have these moments that bring us crashing back to reality. For some of us, it's we find ourselves, like if you have ever been in a place where you are up all night with a 3-month-old baby who won't go to sleep and you have no idea how to get this baby to think, and everything in you is like, I think I'm just supposed to shake this baby, but actually I'm not supposed to do it. Like you just lose, you're like, I've lost control, right? If you've ever been in the grocery store with a toddler who's strapped in to the cart, but they're having a temper tantrum, kicking their shoes off and screaming at the top of their lungs, and you're having to push them through the aisles just to get out of the store to avoid embarrassment, you realize, I've lost control. Maybe you've planned this incredible vacation, and you've planned it for months, maybe even an entire year, and you can't wait to go on this trip. But then the day comes when you're supposed to leave, and you wake up sicker than you've ever been before. You're like, I don't have control like I think I do. We have these moments in life where we like to think we have control, but then we realize, I don't. And the question is, how do we respond to that? So my question for you this morning is, where are you fighting for control in your life? Are you fighting for control? Do you find that angst? Do you find that wrestle? Do you find that tension? And when we bump up against places where we don't have control, we oftentimes learn a lot about ourselves, who we are, and what we believe. And what we find in our passage today in Acts chapter 9 is a story of two men who lose some measure of control in their life, and we get to learn how they, and possibly how we, should respond. This is where we begin. This is Acts chapter 9, starting in verse 1. We read this. Meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. Now, chapter 9 actually connects back to the end of chapter 7 and the beginning of chapter 8, and the connecting piece between these 2 points in the story is the person of Saul. You might hear me throughout this message call Saul Paul because his name will later be changed to Paul, and we know him better as Paul, but if you hear me talk about those two people, they're one and the same, Saul and Paul. Now, the central focus of the story of Acts through Acts chapter 1 through 6 is this incredible momentum caused by the power of God's presence in his people. And the result of God's presence in and through his people are all of these incredible things, incredible miracles, supernatural sermons where thousands of people are responding on a given day, people who have courageous convictions standing up to the authorities who are pushing back against what Jesus is doing through the church. And the framework for the book of Acts is found in chapter 1, verse 8, which reads this. Jesus is saying this to the disciples before he ascends back to the Father. He says, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, take note of that, and to the ends of the earth, which means God has intention and has a plan for his mission to spread his message throughout the entire world. And the starting point for the spread of God's message of the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ is Jerusalem. The starting point is in Jerusalem. On this map, it's the star there. Now, the overall consensus of the religious leaders in Jerusalem at this time is, well, we thought that Jesus was the problem. We thought that Jesus was the one who was causing all of this stir and causing this commotion, but now Jesus is gone. We got rid of him. We executed him. He's done and gone with, but now his disciples are still around, and the uproar and the commotion is maybe even that much greater than when Jesus was here. And so you have these religious leaders, one of whom is Saul, trying to figure out how do we stop this movement from growing and spreading. And what sets in at the end of chapter 7, beginning of chapter 8, is persecution. And that persecution is intended to stop the spread of the gospel. This is what we read in Acts 8, verse 1. And Saul approved their killing of him. That's a reference to Stephen. Stephen was a leader in the church, and he was arrested. He was falsely accused. He was put on trial, and at the end of that trial, immediately he was executed. And this guy, Saul, is presiding over his execution, approving of it. On that day, a great persecution broke out against the church in Jerusalem, and all except the apostles were scattered throughout where? Judea and Samaria. But Saul began to destroy the church, going from house to house. He dragged off both men and women and put them in prison. So this persecution that's incited by Saul is intended to stop the move of God and primarily take back control. Take back control and take back the power to keep things in check in Jerusalem. But the irony of the persecution is that it doesn't stop the spread of the gospel. The irony of the persecution is that it actually furthers the spread of the gospel, because where does it say the disciples go next? They go to Judea. They go to Samaria. They leave Jerusalem, and they take with them the good news of Jesus, saying, hey, we are going to continue to share about this wherever we go. And as you track through the chapter 8, you find story after story after story of God doing amazing things through his people in Samaria. And the significance of Samaria is that's enemy territory. Jews and Samaritans did not get along. They did not like each other. So the fact that revival breaks out in enemy territory is far more amazing than what has happened before. And the spread of the gospel just keeps going. What Paul tried to do in stopping the gospel only furthers the gospel. And what he's now trying to do at the beginning of chapter 9, he's trying to get ahead of the spread. Because we're told he's going to Damascus. Damascus is 60 miles north of the Sea of Galilee, which is the top point on that map. That's like from here to Sheboygan. He's trying to get ahead of the spread to stop it and arrest and haul off any Christians he finds along the way. And this is what happens as Paul travels to Damascus. This is chapter 9, verse 3. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him, and he fell to the ground. He's just walking along as mad as can be. It says he's breathing out murderous threats under his breath. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to just wait till I get him. I'm going to, And then he's just leveled by a blinding light. I think sometimes we take for granted the power that light has and how light can just stop us in our tracks. A handful of years ago, I went to get a physical, and the doctor asked me during the physical, hey, when was the last time you had your eyes checked? And I said, I don't know, maybe elementary school? I mean, I think that was a thing they did in elementary school back then. You got annual eye exams or whatever. I'm like, I don't think I've got them checked since then. And she's like, you should go get your eyes checked. I was like, really? Do I? I can see fine. She's like, go get your eyes checked. So I did. Earlier this year, I eventually got my eyes checked. And I, again, haven't had an eye exam in decades. So I sit there. They dilate my eyes. I do the whole thing. They're like, yeah, you're fine. We maybe have a little prescription that you could take if you want. I'm like, no, I can read. I'm fine. I'm okay. I don't want to like admit to myself that maybe I'm getting older and maybe I need glasses. So they, as I'm leaving, they're like, do you have glasses? And I say, no. Like, do you have glasses in your car? I say, no. And they hand me those stupid flimsy like visor glasses with like the white thing on the ears. And I'm like, okay, thanks. As I walk out of the lobby, I ditch them in the trash. I'm like, I'm not wearing those stupid things. I open the door, and as soon as I step outside, I'm like overcome. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I cannot see. And I didn't want to look like an idiot and go dig through the trash to find the flimsy things. I didn't want to go back in and ask for another pair. So I just went to my car, and I just start looking wherever I can for glasses. I find a pair of Becky sunglasses, clearly female glasses, with sparkly edges to them. And I had to go to Metro Market. I had to go buy something at the store. So I'm walking through Metro Market looking like an absolute fool with these glasses on. Light is powerful. God says he is light. That's what the scriptures say. God is love. God is also light. And light can stop you dead in your tracks. And that's what happens here. It renders Paul blind. He can't see anything. He goes down, it says verse 4, he fell to the ground, and then he heard a voice. You got to wonder, when you lose one sense, another sense is heightened, and how much more loudly did Paul hear what he heard because he couldn't see? He heard a voice say to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? So the book of Acts tells the story of the mission of God being implemented through the church. Sometimes we think that the church is the overarching organization that has a unique mission to reach the world, kind of like this diagram shows. However, we would say that it's actually flipped, meaning the mission of God is a larger initiative that actually has a church to implement the mission to reach the world, flipped like on this one. Because the mission of God was started in Genesis 12 before the church of God was ever born. So that means it's not that the mission of God serves the church, rather the church serves the mission of God to reach the world. And what we see here is that Jesus is taking his mission personally. This passage highlights that God takes his mission personally. Because did you notice what Jesus said to Saul? He didn't say, hey, why are you harming the church? Hey, why are you trying to stop the movement of God? He says, why are you persecuting me? He takes it personally, which means there's one other overarching umbrella on the mission of God, and that is Jesus. Jesus stands over his mission. Jesus stands over his church with the intent that we would serve the mission of God, serve him, and reach the world. And here, what God is doing is he's doing two things with Paul in this moment. One, he's confronting him. He's confronting him in this moment. Anybody here like confrontation? I bet you there's a few of you who don't want to raise your hand because you don't want me to call you out, but you love confrontation. I had one guy in the back, in that back corner. He's like, yeah, me, right here. But most of us don't like confrontation. There's a few crazy people in the world who enjoy confrontation. Most people avoid it at all costs. Most people think confrontation is actually a bad thing and we shouldn't have it. However, when confrontation is done in the right posture, with the right sense of humility, it can actually be an act of love and care. I used to work with a guy at our church in Atlanta. His name was Dave Gilmore. And when we would be in hard conversations or have a hard moment or need to go have a hard conversation with somebody, he would always ask the question, do we care enough to confront? Do we care enough about people to confront them? Now, that doesn't mean we go around just telling everybody anything we want and blasting them with all of our opinions and be like, oh, this is me just loving them. I'm just going out into the world telling people how I feel. But when you have the right mindset, the right posture, the right heart, it can actually be an act of love and care. When I was about 25, 26 years old, I was new in ministry. I was preaching one of my first sermons on 1 Corinthians 8. Paul talks about how knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. And I preached this whole sermon. Near the end, I kind of left my main point behind, and I started talking about freedom, because as Paul moves from chapter 8 to chapter 9 in 1 Corinthians, he's talking about freedom. And I made this great, amazing point on freedom. And I got to the end of the message, and I got this email from a guy from our church. He's like, hey, I'd love to talk with you about your message. And I was like, hey, this is great. I impacted somebody. So much so that they want to talk to me about the things that I said. So I said, this guy's name was Paul. He was a missionary who was home on furlough, on a home assignment. We set up a meeting to talk at a Starbucks. And I come in, and he's like, hey, you did a great job, but I think you might have missed the point of what this passage was doing. And then he walked me through why. And he was so kind. And he was so gracious, and it was so clear that what he wanted from me was my best, and he wanted to set me up and help me on my journey, and I so appreciated the way we had that conversation, because he came into it in a place of humility and love. And Jesus here is confronting Paul, I would imagine, in a posture of humility and love, even though he's doing it somewhat forcefully, because God is love. And the purpose of this confrontation isn't just to mess with Paul, but there's also a thing happening. The other thing that's happening here is revelation. God is seeking to reveal himself to Paul in this moment. Because Paul stops, he's blind, and then we read this in verse 5. Saul responds, "Who are you, Lord?" Now, there's debate here about whether or not Saul actually understands that this is Lord Yahweh, the God of Israel, the King of the universe, or is this more a sign of respect saying, "Who are you, sir? Can you help me understand who you are?" We don't have clarity at that moment what Paul fully understands, but what Jesus says next sure does make it clear to Paul, because he says, "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting." And I've got to imagine, for Saul in this moment, there's all kinds of paradigms that are getting broken. Like, Jesus, that guy we strung up on a cross a few months ago, that guy who got buried in a tomb. Sure, his disciples said that he came back from the dead, but we didn't believe that for a hot second. And this is you? That whole thing was actually true? And you got to wonder what associations he starts to make about who Jesus is in light of who he said he was on earth, and what that meant for what he was saying about the God of the Old Testament who Saul worshiped and pursued. And then he goes on to say this, "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." Jesus is revealing himself to Saul. I'm the King of Kings. I'm the Lord of Lords. I created all things. I sustain all things. All things were created by me and for me. I am at the center of everything. Essentially, Saul, you don't have the control that you think you do. I am the one who holds all things together, and my mission won't be stopped. It's one of the things, one of the subtexts of this passage is that God's mission can't be stopped, no matter how hard Saul tries. So he's rendered blind. The traveling companions he have with him probably are like disoriented as well. It's this moment of just, whoa, perspective. We don't have control. And then this happens, verse 7. The men traveling with Saul stood there speechless. They heard the sound, but did not see anyone. Saul got up from the ground, but when he opened his eyes, he could see nothing. So they led him by the hand into Damascus. For 3 days he was blind, and he did not eat or drink anything. I got to wonder what went through his mind during those 3 days, and how he had to navigate everything he knew about life before and what was happening in his moment right now. Now, in this story, there's a pretty quick scene change. It goes from the Damascus road leading up to the city to now all of a sudden, verse 10, we're in the city, specifically in a guy's house named Ananias. Verse 10, in Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called him in a vision. Ananias. Yes, Lord, he answered. Now, Ananias is an interesting figure, in part because we don't know much about him. There's no context to who he is, and we don't hear of him again. This is the only spot. This is his one cameo in the biblical story. He's here, and that's it. And the Lord has a specific task for him. Verse 11, the Lord told him, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight. Now, this is interesting instruction from God to Ananias, in part because God has already committed Ananias to the task, right? My wife does that from time to time. She's like, hey, I told somebody that you were going to go do this for him. I was like, you did? Like, did you want to consult me about it? She's like, no, you're just going to go do it. Like, that's what God is saying to Ananias. You are going to do this. Ananias didn't get a say one way or the other about it. And Ananias knows exactly who Saul is. Verse 13, Lord, Ananias answered, I have heard many reports about this man and all the harm that he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with authority from the chief priests to arrest all who call on your name. Essentially, he's saying, God, are you sure this is a good idea? Like, do you understand what you're doing? I mean, I know who this guy is. I know what he's done. And if I know, you surely know, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think he's going to be able to build trust with your people moving forward. I think people are going to be skeptical of what he has done in the past. I mean, essentially, Lord, you are inviting a terrorist to come and be a part of your mission in your movement. Do you know what you're doing? I mean, literally, it would be like inviting somebody who was a church shooter to be part of the movement of God. If you remember back in 2015, a young individual, a young man, walked into a church in South Carolina, appearing to be a member of this Bible study and gunned down 9 people. It would be like asking him to now be a frontline missionary and spreading the gospel. God, do you have any idea what you're doing? Because Saul is a religious terrorist. That's who he is in this moment. Which highlights not only does God take his mission personally, he also uses unlikely people. He uses people we would never suspect, that we would never think could be effective in the work that he's called them to. God is always subverting our expectations. And this is the Lord's response to Ananias. He says, go, verse 15. This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel. And then I find verse 16 very interesting. He says, I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. Part of me wonders if Ananias hears that. He's like, okay, I'm on board now. If this guy's going to pay for what he's done, I can get behind it, sure. And I don't think God is necessarily being vindictive. I just think he knows the resistance that he's going to face, the suffering, the persecution that's going to come his way, and he knows he needs the right person for this job, and he knows, oddly enough, Saul is the guy to do it. Now, here's what's great about this story. Not only does God use a terrorist and call a terrorist to move his mission forward, but he also uses an average guy like Ananias. I mean, sometimes we read the biblical story, and it's hard for us to connect with what we're reading because some of the things that happen in the story are not things that we have done. Like, I've never overseen the execution of somebody and been this crazy religious zealot who was on a rampage to stop the movement of God and have my life get turned around. I have a hard time connecting with who Saul is. But I do connect with an average guy who's just trying to live his life, just trying to keep his head down, keep his nose clean, and do the next right thing, and also be skeptical about, oh, that person over there. Like, I do resonate with Ananias. And God didn't have to use Ananias. He could have just given Saul his sight back and said, you're going to go do this. But he calls this average guy to participate in his mission. Sometimes we think the most impactful things are going to be done by the most extraordinary people on earth, but sometimes it's the little things, it's the subtle things that are done by the average person that are just as significant. So if you're here this morning, you're like, hey, I'm not going to travel the world and stand on stages and invent things and move God's mission forward in that way. Maybe not, but you do have the ability to pray for somebody. You do have the ability to ask the question, how is God at work in my life right now, and what is he calling me to in this moment? Because not only does God use unlikely people, he also has a unique purpose for each person. Ananias' unique purpose is to be a commissioner for Paul on his mission. And he says yes to God, even though he's unsure about God's decision. Verse 17, then Ananias went to the house and entered it. Placing his hands on Saul, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord, Jesus who appeared to you on the road as you were coming here, has sent me so that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. Immediately, something like scales fell from Saul's eyes, and he could see again. He got up and was baptized, and after taking some food, he regained his strength. So Ananias has this unique purpose, this unique role of being a commissioner for Saul, essentially being the first person who believes that God has called him, and he even calls him brother. Hey, we're on the same team now. And then the unique call for Saul is to be an apostle to the Gentiles. I don't know if you caught that in verse 15. What we will see later in this story is that a big question will emerge through the book of Acts. What does it mean for Gentiles to become a part of God's family? Because up to this point, all of the action has been with Jews. Like Jesus was a Jew. The Jesus movement that's starting here comes from a place of the people of Israel, the Jews. So what does it mean? Which they had very specific rules on how somebody came into the family of God back in the Old Testament. So the question will emerge. Do Gentiles, if they want to become part of this movement, first have to become Jewish? And Paul will be the proponent that says no, and he will push the boundaries of God's movement to people who aren't Jewish. He has a very unique purpose and God's bigger plan for his mission in the world. And so my question for you this morning is, what does that look like for you? What does that look like for you? God uses unlikely people all the time. Maybe you're sitting here this morning and you're like, there's no way God could use me. I'm not smart enough, I haven't done enough, I'm not old enough, or I'm too old, I've seen too much of life, my health is declining, I don't know, this or that. I mean, you could come up with all kinds of excuses for why God wouldn't use you. But my guess is he's trying to. My guess is that he does have a unique purpose for you. The question is, what is that for you? Now, whatever it is, I know that part of it is being a witness wherever you go. Looking at your everyday life, where you live, where you work, where you play, and knowing that God has called you to be present in that space to bear witness to who he is and what he's doing in the world. Here's what this is looking like in my life these days. Over the last couple weeks, I started taking a class, a communication class, specifically on humor, a stand-up comedy class. I thought I didn't want to tell people this because I'm like, people are going to all of a sudden think, like, where can I go watch you embarrass yourself trying to be funny? I'm like, that's not what I'm looking to do. But I've wanted to learn how to be intentionally funny because sometimes I say things in sermons and I don't think it's going to be funny and everybody laughs. And then there are other times I'm like, this is going to get a good laugh, and you guys just sit there like this. So I'm like, what does it take to be intentionally funny? So anyway, I went to this class. I'm 3 weeks into this class. First day of the class, everybody has to stand up front, just give a little introduction, why they're taking the class, what they hope to learn, a little bit about themselves. And I say to the class, hey, I do a lot of communicating, do a lot of speaking for my job, and I'm just trying to learn how to be more intentionally funny. Wasn't planning on saying anything about being a pastor. I was going there as Brian, not Pastor Bryan, just going there for me, not trying to be a witness to the world at all. Somebody in the back of the room goes, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm like, oh, okay. I said, I'm a pastor. And everybody goes, ooh, okay. So the cat's out of the bag, right? Pastor Bryan is, on the scene. So after one of the classes, I'm leaving, and there's this young woman named Rose who's there, and she just strikes up a conversation with me and just starts telling me about being a lapsed Catholic. I mean, she's young, probably late 20s, hasn't been to church in a while, but feels like she should reconnect her relationship with God. She went to a church down in the Kenosha, Racine area, and it just didn't connect with her, and she's like just going on, and she goes, "You probably don't want to talk about this, right? Like, this is your job. You probably want to separate that." I'm like, no, come on. This is great. And it was a reminder to me that everywhere I go, there I am as a follower of Jesus. There I am as somebody. I can't live a compartmental life. Like, I have one life, and all of who I am goes with me everywhere I go. That includes Jesus. And so what is the unique purpose? What is the unique thing that God has put in your life to bear witness to who he is everywhere you go? There's this great quote by Frederick Buechner. He was a pastor in the Vermont area, and he said this. He said, "Your calling is where your greatest passion intersects with the world's deepest need." There's needs everywhere, more needs than any one person could ever meet. But the question is, where does your unique passion, your deep passion, what has God done in you? What has he placed there? What fire burns in you? And how does that meet the need and the needs of our world? See, here's what I know to be true, is that God's mission is moving forward. God's mission to reach the world through the church is happening. It can't be stopped. And you might think to yourself, like, there's no way he could use me. I would like to say, respectfully, you're wrong. He's actually looking to use you. That's what this whole thing is about. Like, coming to church isn't about just getting whatever I get out of this and then it's all for me. It's like, no, like, wherever you go, there you are specifically with Jesus with you. And how has he wired you? How has he gifted you? What passions has he put in your life? And how can you use that to be a faithful witness of Jesus everywhere you go? God's mission can't be stopped. And what you see in this story, both from Saul and Ananias, when they both lose control, right? They're both being pushed out of their comfort zones. They're both saying, hey, this isn't about you. How do they respond? They surrender. They say yes to God. They surrender to what he's inviting them into. And the question is, are we going to do the same? Are you going to be somebody who does the same? Or are you going to resist? Say, that's not for me. Or are you going to sit on the sideline and cross your arms and be like, I'm just going to watch and observe? Or are you going to say yes and follow Jesus wherever he leads you? Because as you do, you get to experience the joy of partnering with God to spread his love to a world that has great need. So may you see that God uses unlikely people to move his mission forward. May you trust that he has a unique purpose for you on that mission, and may you find where your passion meets the world's deepest need. Lord, we thank you so much for who you are. We thank you so much that we are privileged to be called children of God. That regardless of what our past has been, regardless of what our recent story has been, you're inviting us to engage with you in reaching the world with the message of your love, your redemption, and your hope. May we be people who have eyes to see. May we be people who have ears to hear your call, and may we have hearts that are open and willing to respond. Amen.